Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 170 of the Peak of Serenity podcast. I am, as always, one of your hosts, Emallson, and joining me, we have my co host, Anomoly.
Hello.
And this week, we're going to talk about healing.
Yes, I'm so
Healing,
excited
it
actually.
being in a really, I'm gonna, the title you had in the show notes is healing too hard question mark, and i'm I titled the stream a little bit differently, but like I think there's a whole bunch of like healing just being in a really weird place,
Yeah.
and so we're gonna talk about that. There's some other news stuff we were talking about classic hardcore a little bit before the show. We'll touch on that as well because that came out this week.
Yep.
Well, before we get into that, how was raid this weekend, Tom?
Raid was short. We had our first 1 day clear. So
Nice.
we got in there, got out of there. I mean, it took, I think we ended like maybe 15 or 20 minutes before raid ended. So it wasn't like we crushed through it in any sort of sense of it. But no, we had a solid reclear. Um the nerfs helped, I'll say,
Yeah.
I think. But no, it was an easy. I mean, no, very uneventful. I mean, we had a couple wipes to, I think, our typical bosses like Sark and Nelth, and um but we I think we one or two shot Rashok, which is huge for us.
Yeah.
Typically sort of an issue for us. And then Magmarex, I think, was a two shot also, or maybe one shot. Um so yeah, we got the skip this week, which was huge for us. We don't have to like beg friends of guilds who are better than us to steal their lockout skip. So
Nice.
yeah.
Nice. We did not one night clear. And some of that
Oh,
is like we tried some different tank stuff for try and make that cleaner, and it didn't work.
gotcha.
And that just cost time. And then by the time we switched back from doing that, people kind of lost, momentum. We went
Oh
in,
yeah.
we like two shot Neltharion, and then our second pull of Sarkareth, we wiped it like 8%, right?
Ooh.
So we were real close to just like blasting the raid. Uh, we did get Sarkareth down, but not in time to really, like, we wouldn't kill the Salto the right? That's it.
Gotcha.
And so we're gonna go back in and clean up the rest tonight, um, and finish things off. Yeah,
Yeah, the berserk timer changed. I don't know. Funny, we were a couple of attempts that we wiped at low percent. I think we had two lowish percentage wipes on Sark, like similar. We actually got the set of mechanics after the typical enrage. So
yeah,
it's like the black hole with the knockback with the whatever
yeah.
the
It's like
knockback's
the
called.
first cosmic ascension overlap in that you
Yeah,
actually do. Like everybody's downstairs for the very first one, but the first one that people actually do.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So I mean that was interesting. We didn't know how to handle it the first like time or two we hit it. And then we like spent some time like, okay, this is what you do, this is how you handle it. And then like I think like three pulls later when we actually got there, we killed it before that actually ever happened. Like those
Yeah,
abilities ever triggered.
yeah.
So
That's we had a brief discussion in Raid about like what are we gonna do if we get this, and the answer basically was we're not going to get this. Like
yeah.
our goal as a raid team is to reach the point that we're actually skipping the second double dispel, the one at like 710.
Okay.
We want to not get that one either. So we're definitely not gonna sit and plan around the one that happens at 730.
Yeah. I think we've resigned to getting the 710 one. Just because we have a really good setup that puts our mages as the only black hole targets there.
Yeah,
So like they can just run out the black hole ice block and we can dispel. And if we do need to move out for the ascension, like that mage isn't gonna die because they'll be in block. So
yeah, yeah,
um but yeah, no, it's yeah, I mean the nerfs are funnily enough, didn't the only time I felt it was the P1 nerfs. I guess we can go over the nerfs to this because there was a
yeah,
couple nerfs to both Sark and Echo. I figured do it at this point. So for Sark, the I think we just sort of mentioned the one nerf is they've increased the berserk timer from 7:30 to 8 minutes, which means there is like an additional set of mechanics you'll get right at the end if you're still pushing.
yeah.
They also reduced echoing how damage per tick by 20%, which is the dot you get after clearing debuffs in P1,
Yep.
which is actually the largest, I think, nerf through all of this. They reduced the health of empty recollection by 17%.
I think that's
And
actually
then
one of the biggest nerfs because it means you
yeah,
just do more damage to the boss in
yeah,
phase two.
yeah. Just still, I mean, the ads didn't like the because those are the little ads, right? Not the
No,
big
that's the big
ads.
head.
That's the big ad? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So the little ad seemed to have died even quicker this week, but at least a feeling wise, didn't really time it. But yeah, that's so the large ad in phase two, that's that health reduction, which is yeah, definitely big. And then blasting scream cast time increased by 25%, which is the
That's
ad
the
cast in
cast of
P.
the small ads in phase two,
Yeah.
which
Um,
that one's not really a big deal. I don't think like it makes it a little bit easier to not die to it, but the only
you should have it handled.
yeah, the only times we really died to it is when we just entirely screwed it up. And the extra
Mhm.
25% cast time doesn't really let us recover from that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think the only thing it helps is like if one ad gets out of the group or is like fully in a puddle and melee can't get to like either stun or like, do something to it quickly, it
Yeah.
gives you a chance to react. But yeah, I mean, yeah, minor. So and they also did make a couple of changes just to the scaling in normal heroic to a bunch of different abilities. I don't think you really need to
Yeah.
go through it, but yeah, so the echoing howler. So number one, the echoing hound nerf is the one thing I did want to talk about just briefly on Sark, which is that again, the dot you get after clearing the debuff in P1, it 20% is fairly large. And so while there is still a ton of damage if you do sort of the two big clear points, like big clear
Yeah.
with the breath on one part and then big clear right at the end with the disintegration. Um, so there still is a lot of healing. It's not like it deletes the ability and you don't need to heal stuff anymore. It just
Right.
makes it so that like people who are not sort of getting some of the like AoE healing or like RNG their way into like not having it tick or crit on them, they're just a little bit safer, right?
Yeah.
Like it's sort of you're still going to see the raid chunk, you're just going to need cooldowns at those points, but it makes that part easier, which I think in turn makes your P1s much more consistent because that was
Yeah.
a lot of our problem. Like once we figured out the healing, the next issue was like, okay, how do we not lose people randomly?
Yeah.
And so like that was sort of what we wanted to cover. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think it just makes P1 more consistent, which is nice.
This definitely like phase one is the pressure point for you as well. There's
Yeah.
pressure points in phase three towards the end of phase three now, but we are probably going to be looking at three healing this with the reduction in healing requirement in phase one, and then just outright skipping. Like I said, we wanted to beat the 710 dispel,
Yeah.
and we were actually quite a bit. I think we killed, but you know, with people alive, with potentially one extra DPS, should easily be able to be at that point. Even if we don't literally beat the double dispel, like if we get there and the boss is at 0.5% health, you know,
Yeah.
then the boss
Yeah.
dies.
Yeah, that's the goal. Yeah. No, yeah, I mean, I don't know. We typically don't change healing comps very often in Reclear times just because
We've been changing healing comps every week for these
really? Yeah.
bosses. It's a lot of attendance stuff, right? We have a
Gotcha.
we have some attendance stuff. We have a new trial. We had one of our healers went to Incarnate, a Jack's guild.
Oh,
Um,
cool.
Shout out to Sock Choi. Go Jack while you're the better priest. Um, and
Shots
then
fired.
the other one of our other healers, stepped down from the raid team because of IRL. You know, got new
Gotcha. Yeah.
job and such. So we've got new healers in for both those spots, and that meant changing the healing comp, and that also meant completely redoing CDs because we no longer have a holy.
Gotcha. Oh, yeah. Yeah,
So,
that's rough.
um,
That's rough.
yeah, but we are gonna. I think we're gonna look at three, make it easier to just not do that last overlap at all. Just like don't do it.
That's fair. That's fair.
Um, the other set of nerfs. So you mentioned Echo of Notharian, also 8 nerfs. This one's
Mhm.
they didn't touch Volcanic Heart. Spoiler: no nerfs to Volcanic Heart, and that sucks.
Yeah.
That's like everybody wants that nerfed because it's not fun.
Yeah.
So sucks that they didn't touch that, but they did do a bunch of other things. So Neltharian's health got reduced by 5%. This, if you weren't already doing the strat where you push out of phase one before the fourth echoing fissure, you really should consider doing that now. It removes a bunch of the cooldown pressure in phase one. It lets you just overload phase two with cooldowns to keep everybody alive through it. And then some of
Mhm.
the changes to phase three, like both the reduced health means that you can more reliably kill the boss once you hit phase three. But then also, Ebon Destruction's periodic damage reduced by 10% on Mythic difficulty. That's the dot that you get from the Ebon Destruction in phase three.
Mhm.
That trucks, and so you
Oh
need
yeah.
fewer cooldowns in phase three now to deal with it. And then they also nerfed the Voice from Beyond HP in phase two. That's again like just a little bit faster phase. And then the Shatter periodic damage got nerfed by 10%, which if you're like us and the first pull of every night, all of your markers are just a little bit off and people double break every wall, uh,
Oh yeah.
helps a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, we alleviate that issue by just having a pull where we wipe. So like that's how we deal with like the walls. Like our first pull is just stay alive through like I think the second wall break, and then we'll get all the markers down, then wipe, and then go from there. But yeah, I mean, I will say so. A couple things I did notice just on at least from a healing point of view. The shatter nerf is whatever. I mean, we don't. I think
Yeah,
we might have gotten 1 3 stack, which is still not a huge deal.
yeah,
But the Ebon destruction, at least in once you get to the second application, that second to third period felt not as awful, right? Like
it felt a
for
lot
us,
safer
that's
for us.
yeah. For us, that was always like the point where like okay, we need to start rolling CDs. Like people need to start like our squishier class need to start potentially using defensives. Um, and then the health nerf, while generally speaking, you're still hitting the health like barrier as you
Yeah,
get to the third ad in P2, where he like takes like no damage or goes immune.
right.
The less 5% still made it feel like we just pushed like we got the third Ebon destruction, but we killed it literally as the third one went off.
Right. That's how we
So
were as
like
well.
yeah, so it that little bit quicker because I think as the third one goes off, it's a ton of extra dot damage on the raid. So typically we'll lose people like almost immediately,
Yeah.
and then if we lose a tank to the ads, and the ads are all over the place, and that's sort of
Then
like
it
even
all
if the
falls
boss only has
apart.
like
Yeah.
yeah, even the boss only has like 2 or 3% health at that point, like we've lost wipes to that or lost attempts to
Yeah.
that just because yeah,
Yeah,
those final three
absolutely.
seconds it just like ugh, falls
Yeah.
apart. So
One of the nice things as well about the HP nerf, there's a lust strat that we were starting to play around with. We ended up abandoning for purposes of just going back to our old strat and killing the boss. We brought it back
mhm.
this week, which is lusting as soon as phase three starts.
Oh,
So in order to do this, you want to hold your cooldowns at the end of phase two. You want to not send 3 minute cooldowns at all in phase two. You only get two uses anyway, because like I mean, I guess technically you get three because we killed it at like 6:26. So technically you would get a third if you did exactly at 3 minutes,
uh-huh.
and then exactly at 6 minutes. Um, but anyway, we so the 5% HP nerf makes it easier to, like you were alluding to, pin the boss at the 35% mark without those cooldowns.
Right.
So that let us pretty straightforwardly just like lust at the start of phase three, hit all of our cooldowns, burn the boss, and
Nice. Yeah, we still do the lust after the first Ebon destruction, I think. I think that's when we lost. I don't remember. Like after the boss moves, I think and people are starting to plant. Um, we hit it then. But yeah, no, it's definitely that P3 nerf is it seems my like 10% doesn't seem like a ton, but it's um definitely helps for that final piece. And the 5% health nerf, of course, is always good.
yeah,
The one sort of I don't know if you hit this, but there was a bug um,
yeah,
where corruption, particularly the second corruption people, could also be targeted by volcanic hearts.
yes,
And they would be corrupted, so they'd be unhealable while taking the volcanic heart dot. So it seemed very RNG, where you could get that sort of overlap. We didn't see it on any of our attempts this week, but they did put in a hot fix to sort of stop that from occurring, which is
yeah.
good. So.
When so one of the guys in my guild raiding with another team on Tuesdays, and
Mhm.
ran into that exact thing. They're progressing Neltharion right now. He ran into that exact thing, and he was trying to like confirm it with me, and I'm like, I don't see it in the log, man. I don't know. Uh, but apparently it was real, and so they did fix it. We didn't run into it on Friday. By the time Friday rolled around,
Gotcha.
they already fixed
Oh, that's good. That's good. That's good. Yeah, no, yeah, it was we didn't see it, but that seems like it's just an off way. You'll just lose the person unless they have a massive amount of cooldowns and like they're
it.
about
Yeah,
to push the ad over. So
yeah,
um but yeah, I think that's it then for hot fixes and changes for this week rating wise. I don't know if you had any other thing you want to talk about for um around like your raid this week or the any PV
yeah.
stuff.
Well, real briefly touch on. So my raid team has two, or my guild has had two raid teams for 5 years now. It's been my team on the weekend and then Bab's team on days. So originally Tuesday, Wednesday. I think it was Tuesday. And they moved to Wednesday, Thursday this tier. And then this week they decided that they're no longer raiding,
Sucks. That
which
sucks.
was kind of out of the blue for a lot of people. And so just generally kind of sucks. Yep, big, big sad. So there's now a bit of a diaspora of those people going around. I've heard some of them might be applying to your guild, Anomoly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we've had some of them
Hopefully.
apply to join the weekend team. We hadn't filled out that final healer spot yet. We had someone filling it with an alt,
Yeah.
and there was potential that they maybe just took the spot as a main, but then one of the healers from the weekday team applied to the,
Oh, nice.
and a couple other people from their team applying to. Generally, kind of sucks that that team is dead,
Yeah.
but people are finding places to
That's awesome.
into the world.
Yeah, hopefully it doesn't. I mean, it doesn't sound like it affects you at all on the weekend. But yeah, that sucks. Whenever like, I mean, yeah, I don't want to get into it, but yeah, it's
Yeah,
always sucks when like a rating team sort of steps down. And I mean, I'm almost positive. I don't know any of the details, but I'm almost positive it's a like the leadership is just like I don't want to like not that they don't want to do this anymore, but it's like I am just tired of being this person, and it's
yeah,
like I need to do something else, and like there's just nobody left to step up. That's exactly how my so before I joined DU, that's exactly how my guild ended. Was like I basically was raid leading at the time, and I was like I just don't have the energy to do it,
yeah,
and I was like, and I told like the other officers in the guild, and I was like, if anyone wants to step in, I still will play. Like I'll still play the game, right? I
yeah,
haven't quit yet, but it's like I just don't want to be a raid leader. I don't want to have that responsibility, like the recruitment and everything like that. And like, yeah, that team, we just nobody picked it up, and we just sort of ended. Like
yeah,
I think they may have rated for like a half a tier after that as like a 10-man guild, and
yeah,
um then ended. So that sucks. Sucks to see guilds sort of dissolve, but hopefully everybody who wants to keep playing finds a home. So
yeah.
cool.
Uh,
Well, maybe on a happier note, shift some gears here and talk about some news. And so if you're living under a rock and you don't play World of Warcraft ever, I don't know why you're listening to this, but then the one big thing came out this week is WoW Hardcore Classic Hardcore was released this week. I believe it's Thursday evening,
mm,
US time, and it is a blast. You know, a bunch of people played hardcore. If you're not familiar with the hardcore sort of rule set, previous to this, there was an add-on where you could sort of play the game in this manner. And essentially, the idea is it's one life. You have
yeah,
one life. You die, game over. It sort of stems from a lot of the ARPG games have a hardcore mode where if you die, your character's dead and you can't continue. So they sort of incorporated into a official server, an official rule set for WoW.
one of the big differences between the add-on and official servers is that the add-on was set up basically to be solo self-found. No auction house, no trading, no mail. Um, you could technically, I think, group up for like group quests and things like that.
Like instances, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, and that sort of stuff. But other than that, like you were just using things that you made or found yourself.
Mhm.
Whereas on the official servers, they don't have official solo self found. That is something that they talked about in one of the interviews, that they were like looking at it. But for this release, it is just like basically regular classic hardcore.
Yeah.
So you can use the auction house, you can mail all that stuff, and you've played it a little bit. I've played it more than I would like to admit, and a lot of people are there. A lot of people are playing.
Yeah, I mean, I was definitely fighting for spawns. I played a little bit Friday evening after my Wrath raid, and yeah, I was fighting for spawns to like kill things in like the gnome starter area. And even as I got out of it, I went to, the first little town and got caught with trying to find some mobs. So I mean, it's a cool new thing. It's interesting. I think if you like classic, um, I think it's a cool idea. Like for me, and we've talked about this in the past, like I think classic leveling is probably the best the leveling has ever been in one. Not ever, but
Not
probably one of the
ever,
best experiences.
but up there, yeah.
Yeah, in terms of like it's a difficult enough thing where you're not just sort of pissed you have to spend 4 hours leveling, which is like what I feel like retail is today. It's like I just buy boosts on retail because I cannot like leveling is just ridiculous.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's like difficult enough, and you got to put a bunch of time in, and I think there's some actual achievement behind it if you make it to 60. So,
Yeah, for
um,
reference, I made it to level 15 and then died last night. Not the highest I've ever made it, but uh so one of the downsides of the current population level is that you end up with a lot of hyper spawns where you kill one mob and just as soon as it dies another one is respawning at its location. And that can make
exactly.
some areas extremely dangerous. And so gotta be really careful. Highly recommend avoiding caves. Even if you're a paladin like I was, paladin is a little bit, you know, I I trained to zoned a couple people to death last night too. It's unfortunate. But Blessing of Protection lets you kind of just, you know, become immune and then get out of dodge. But of course, does not prevent magic damage. So, the first cave that I tried that in that had mobs casting fireball at me did not make it out of the cave.
Didn't Oh man, that stinks. Yeah, that's caves are the deadly scary areas
Yeah.
of WoW Classic for sure. So
Yeah.
yeah, no, it's been a lot of fun. Like I'm only level I think 6 or 7, 6 I think.
Yeah.
So still like super early, but no, it's a cool idea. Like you play the game a lot different. Like I was saying, like I also ran into the hyperspawn issue like out in the world, and I'd like killed a bear, then went to go kill which they aggro, went to go kill like a yellow boar, and the bear respawned behind me as soon as I got in combat with the boar. And
Yeah.
like I was already at like 75% health before the bear hit me, and now the bear's hitting me in the back, dazes me. I'm just like running. And at that point, you just hold W. I have no other skills,
Yes.
so I like don't even have gouge yet. I don't think. And like, yeah, I'm screwed. So it's well, gouge when I worked on the bear anyway. I think it's humanoids only, right? So
Yeah.
but yeah, no, it's a fun little experience. Blizzard also did tweet out like a heat map of deaths. They did it in like a little video format of like showing it every 2 hours, a different screenshot. And it's
Yeah.
just hilarious, like watching like the deaths sort of spider out from all the starter zones to like the secondary zones and like tertiary ones. It's also interesting on the map as you can see like the road from Menethil Harbor is just dotted like some of the areas around it are just dotted like littered with like yellow dots for all of
Yeah.
it. Where people are trying to run back to like from maybe like Darnassus is a night elf into the starter zone, right? For gnomes. So
Yeah.
um but yeah, it's fun. It's a cool idea. I mean, I don't know if it has a ton of legs because I think after you do it once, it's sort of it. But it's a cool achievement if you make it to max hardcore.
I
I
think,
can't even imagine doing anything after that.
yeah. So, like, at least for me, the way that I always played WoW before Legion, right, was I just leveled a character. When I hit max level, I basically logged off and made another. That's how I play. And
Hmm.
the permadeath, it's a little different, but it's still like that's the primary gameplay loop. Hit your cap and then character. And ideally, your cap is not level 15. You know,
Yep. Yeah.
but that is the main idea. So, we'll We'll see how it pans out over time. So far, I'm having fun. It is like I've been playing with the hardcore add-on on and off for a while. It's just a nice thing. Like after raid, I will just go
Yeah.
veg out, turn on something on YouTube or Netflix, and go level. And that is, I will say, not the greatest way to reliably level when you're after raid, tired, maybe had a bit to drink, watching Netflix, not really paying super close attention to what's going on in the game. It's a great way to die.
Oh yeah,
Great
100%,
way to
100%.
die. But it is still like it still has the classic pacing of being relatively slow gameplay. Um,
Uh-huh.
although I will say one final note: I played a paladin for the actual release of the hardcore realms, and um, it is very auto attack heavy, but it's a lot less auto attack heavy than I was expecting, given its reputation. Like I have not played a classic paladin in like 15 years.
Yeah.
And so I went back to it for the first time in 15 years and I was expecting to literally just be auto attacking for the
Yeah.
majority of it. And there's actually like quite a bit more.
Couple more
Not like
buttons.
retail levels of button pushing, but you actually have spells to cast.
Oh,
It,
nice.
it felt in some ways more active than like a priest, which I played a little
Okay.
bit of, because you don't have to ration your mana so severely. You can actually
Yeah,
use your abilities.
that's true.
Whereas like a
Yeah,
priest, you're like, do I cast this extra smite? Or do I save it for the next mob so I can do an extra mob before I have to drink maybe?
exactly. Yeah, that's actually a good point. Oh, that's fun. Yeah, I think I'm gonna continue with my rogue, and if my rogue dies, maybe do something crazy and do like a shaman, which I've never leveled a classic shaman. I didn't play
Yeah.
horde at all in classic, so
I might go
um,
back to druid next. I might go do a druid. The
nice.
friends in my guild that they're playing are playing dwarves. So I was
Okay,
a human paladin, ran up there to meet one of them. They died before I got there. Great time.
nice.
So now we're all level desynced because I died at level 15 and they were like catching up to me.
Yeah,
So maybe I just like start over with a night elf now, and by the time I catch up to them, I will be able to actually get to Stormwind without it being a death.
that's awesome. Yeah, that. Funnily enough, Night Elf Druid was the first character I ever created in World of Warcraft,
Night elf
retail
druid
at least.
is the first character that I got to level
Oh, nice,
because I
nice.
started playing in BC, but first
Yeah,
character to level 7.
nice. Well, cool. Well, yeah, that's hardcore. We'll probably give a couple more minor updates as we go through, see if we
Yeah,
make any actual progress. So a couple maybe quick hitters here in the news section, and then we can get into the main topic of the day. Blizzard finally released a sort of statement on overlays. So we talked about this about reading sort of real time reading of the combat log to then overlay information onto the game. Basically, they said they are going to make changes to how the advanced combat log is populated in advance of season 3, so that prevents any sort of the overlay usage from happening. So pretty clear indication they're going to make changes to it. So like essentially, I think that's them saying, just stop making these things. We're going to change it in like 2 or 3 months anyway.
yeah.
Just let it die, which
Related,
is good news.
related. There is a patch 10.2 vendor build on the CDN. This is generally the precursor to a PTR release.
Hmm.
10.1.7 comes out in like 2 weeks.
Yeah, not next week, but the week after.
Yeah, 2 weeks. So probably getting the 10.2 PTR soon, and that's probably when we'll actually start seeing details about what they're going to do to the advanced combat.
Yeah,
Or well, that's the earliest I think we'd start seeing details. Their blue post was very vague, um,
yeah.
but we will see what they actually do for.
Yeah. Yeah, it was more I think it's more of just one of those things where they just want to tell the community, like, "We're going to change this, so, like, just don't continue to, like, look at things or build things," right? Where don't spend the time. And it's probably honestly, it's probably more for, like, world first guilds than anybody else of, like, "Hey,
Yeah,
don't even investigate this. It's not worth your time. We'll change it." So,
yeah.
um, I think cool, yeah, the only other final, I think, news post you just sort of mentioned was that 10.2 went up on the vendor CDN. So we'll see hopefully a new patch PTR up in a short couple weeks, maybe right after 10.17. Um, so cool. So before we get into the healing discussion, there was one other minor topic I wanted to talk about, which was Blizzard did put in a couple of hot fixes that did not directly nerf the God comp, but essentially made changes to the utility the God comp brings in Mythic Plus to lessen its impact, right? So I think the first thing is they did make changes to Halls of Infusion, particularly the trash between the second and third boss, which previously, if you used Priest Mind Soothe, allowed you to skip um, or death skip part of that trash, um, which now makes it essentially impossible because they've changed sort of the way that what the creatures detect and things like that.
Did you see the new tech?
No, I didn't. There's new tech that isn't that.
You can still skip it with Mind Soothe,
Oh,
but
damn it.
only if you have a Night Elf tank like a Guardian Druid.
Oh,
So what you do is you Mind Soothe all the other stuff,
uh huh.
and then the tank pulls the dragons to the side. Everybody else runs through. Tank goes through and hits Shadow Meld, and they reset.
Gotcha.
So that you can still do it, but now instead of a priest, you need a priest and a Night Elf tank,
Yeah,
which
gotcha.
means, I mean, basically, Night Elves can be any tank except for Vengeance DH, and Paladin, right? They can't be Paladins.
Nanos can't be paladins. Are you sure Nanos can't be DHs?
Oh,
They
right.
can.
Sorry, it's Paladin. They can be DH.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, yeah. It's like
yeah, that's yeah, brain fart. They can be warriors. They can be monks. They can be druids. They can be demon hunters. Cannot be paladins. Missing one?
monks, druids, warrior.
Warrior. They can be warriors.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
uh, that's the uh, that's the new tech. You can still skip it. It still requires Mind Sleuth to do it. It's just now it
Nice,
has the extra requirement of also your tank has to be able to drop threat.
nice, nice. Yeah. So, or just to let your tank die and res them, right? Like that's the
Yeah,
other
that's the other thing you
potential
can do.
option. Yeah. But yeah, so that's one part of there. Sorry, I thought it was a little bit more. I thought it was better than that. So you can still do the skip, just we'll lose a person.
Yeah.
They also did reduce some of the dot damage in Halls of Infusion and Uldamon.
Yep.
So in Uldamon, the infinite time reavers towards the end of the dungeon, they're still on time cooldown was increased to 8 seconds from 4 seconds.
In theory, that one didn't
Oh,
actually go. That's one of the ones that like went
they
in but
released it
differently. So there's the
because they released the
undocumented.
damage it does, right?
Yeah, there was the
Sorry.
Wowhead post about undocumented changes. One of which was the Niltharian one that we talked about. The other one is that instead of it doubling the cooldown, they reduced the damage done by 60%.
Gotcha. 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 So yeah, so sorry. So yeah, on that dot they reduce the damage it does, so less reliance on Master Spell, and then also the dragons and Halls of Infusion, which we were just sort of talking about. Um the damage now ticks every 2 seconds versus every 1 second, so a 50% sort of reduction in the ticks you'll receive. Um so yeah, so a couple of minor nerfs to things. I'm assuming we'll see more things like this sort of week over week as Blizzard sort of reduces the importance of the utilities some of the other classes a part of the Exodia or God Comp and Mythic Plus have. So
Yeah, there was also a Twitter post floating around. Is a Twitter uh, just pointing to the death stats in raid for um, different classes,
uh
pointing
huh.
out that all five of the specs in the Exodia comp are at the like the best in terms of deaths.
Oh
Either
really?
either tied for the best or are the best in terms of survivability. So that's another factor. Like augmentation is obviously super survivable. Fire Mage also has cheat, ice cold or ice block, whichever. I don't know
Yeah,
what they run in keys these days, but both of them are good. Shadow Priest has dispersion. Honestly, it kind of impresses me that Shadow Priest is doing so well, but Shadow Priest has dispersion, so you know. And
that's
then Holy
true.
Paladin is just loaded. So
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, they'll I guess Blizzard will continue to make changes. I think we don't see a major shift until season 3, and then we'll see what they actually do. Um, because yeah, as long as augmentation is in its position, it's sort of hard hard locked. So
yeah,
um So cool. So I think that was all for the majors. Was there any other topics before we wanted to sort of talk about? All right, the topic I want to talk about, which is why healing sucks in Dragonflight.
Let's talk about healing.
Yeah. So this is. I mean, we're a couple of weeks after a lot of this was sort of a major topic in sort of the community, where like Jack, I think, posted a video. Thune posted a
Dude.
video on. Yeah, I think that's how you pronounce his name. He's a guide writer over at Wowhead. Posted a video on sort of the general the general feeling around how healing is working and sort of is done in today's sort of mostly rating environment, I'd say, but it does trickle into Mythic Plus in terms of that. And so they sort of go over a bunch of different things, primarily the fact that healers today are extremely powerful in relative to sort of your DPS and your tank specs. And just in general are relative to like our power over other expansions or other sort of tiers, right? And so because we're also powerful to actually exert any pressure on a healer, you have to make damage like unreasonably high, or like in the case of like certain abilities, make it so like you have to leverage cooldowns to heal through it. And because we can heal so much, and we have so much power, you have to do that very often, which means that like there will be, a time where you are sort of having a healing event every 30 seconds and like you need a bunch of HPS at that point.
Case in point,
Um,
Rashok. That's
yeah, I mean,
almost
right, yeah,
almost literally exactly that. You have
yeah,
a group soak with a healing absorb and a lot of damage going out every 45 seconds. It's like happens 45 seconds later, it happens again. Then there's another big raid damage event in the intermission, and then it all starts.
yeah. It starts again, yeah. And so the thing is I was like, while it's awesome to be able to heal a ton, it gets into this weird area of a weird feedback loop in terms of to make healing mean anything, or to not have to drop to like one or two healers. Healing, like the damage needs to be deadly enough that you need more than say two healers to heal a fight. And to do that, then you're essentially ping-ponging or like yo-yoing health bars, where like you basically put a ton of pressure on the raid, drop the raid to like 10% health, and then only give the healers a short amount of time before another damage event occurs, where like
Right.
you can't let people sit. And it's funny, like it's very much and Thune does a really good job in the video that he posted and sort of highlighting this, is that it essentially results in like a graph of damage taken looking like just a bunch of like Mount Everests in
Yeah.
between smaller valleys. And it's like a sort of looks like that. Like the whole raid takes a ton of damage, then it drops almost nothing. Takes a ton of damage, drops to a bunch of nothing. And sort of you have to define your healing around that. And it's, to me, it is the worst way to heal things. And the reason is basically it rewards a bunch of like internal team degenerative play. Meaning like essentially now to do any sort of healing, you have to time your cooldowns to the second. Meaning like, for example, like as a monk, if you're doing like your ramp in terms of like clouded focus, you want to make sure you're timing your vivifies so that they hit like the half second after the damage hits as you spam through it.
Yeah.
Um, or like if you're playing a shaman, like I know our shaman does a bunch of stuff to like time cloud burst for certain things like that. And so it becomes like a little bit of a toxic relationship with the way that the damage is coming out, that you have to do this, because if you miss, if you're off by a second, half second, right? People die and then the raid wipes.
Yeah.
Um, and that is sort of this healing style. We had this back in I want to say Warlords of Draenor. Similar idea back then, where you're basically all of your healing was built around your cooldowns, where like there was very little healing between cooldowns, but every 2 minutes or minute and a half, when you had your 3 minutes up and you could rotate them, there'd be a bunch of healing. So it was sort of like just hit your cooldowns when you hit them. There's no sort of pressure in between that. um and
I
so
think.
it becomes,
Oh,
sorry,
sorry.
no, what were you gonna say?
I think one difference between then and now is that there is pressure in between bursts on a lot of fights, right? Like you look at Rashok doesn't have. Rashok is like exactly like that. There is zero damage coming out in between.
Yeah.
Um, but then you have like Sarkareth in phase one, for example. You have a bunch of ticking damage, even aside from the two big pressure points with the first and second clears.
Uh-huh.
You have all of the bombs exploding. that happens all the time, and even in between those, there's still a bunch of other ticking damage because the dot or the debuff that he puts on you at the start just takes damage.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, yeah, that's it. Yeah, and so it basically makes it so that like the only again like the only pressure you can exert now because healers are so powerful is just by making it so almost every ability is deadly that a boss can do.
Yeah,
And then it becomes like StarCraft P1 where it's literally like what is it 2 minutes of just intense like never stop go healing. And it becomes unfun, right? And this sort of trickles into Mythic Plus even where you have like abilities from certain bosses and like mobs that like if you miss healing the person or if you heal the wrong person with one of your GCDs,
yeah,
you
they die.
that someone else will die, right?
Yeah,
You will lose a player. And to me, this is it's honestly why like personally like I've disliked healing this entire tier. Like I think Rashok's a fun fight to heal. I don't know if I agree with the amount of damage that goes out. I mean, it's a very tight healing check, and I think that's the reason it's there. Um, but even like Sarkareth, because the raid takes so much damage, you don't have time to triage. So you're just hoping your AoE heals are hitting, spreading around the raid. And if yours
yeah,
aren't, your healer partners are. And so it becomes a yeah, just an unfun game of like, okay, why did this person die? And it's like, oh well, they didn't have renewing mist on them. So
yes.
this
Run
attempt,
into
so
almost
like,
exactly that. Didn't have
yeah,
renewing mist, or they missed the life binds, or they didn't have glimmer, or
yeah,
they didn't get palm. Although that one's more rare because it's really hard to not get ray orphan.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And so I mean that's sort of the I think the crux of the issue right now with healing in the game is that and this all stems I think as we so go back. So why is this like that, right? Like why is there so much damage that goes out in such quick bursts and healers are required to heal it up? And honestly it's because of the talent trees. I think Dune does a really good job of showing this where it's like while DPS gain a ton of power to do damage, right? Like healing I think is generally generally has been not easier to balance, but like the balance has been more straightforward with healing, where like you have your power increasing tiers, you have your mana reserve tiers, right?
Yeah,
And then when you start to combine those, where like I can get two mana saving talents
yeah,
together, or I get two like mini cooldowns I can now pair together. Like that is extremely powerful for healers.
yeah.
Um,
And it's a little
and
bit. So healers have the extra thing where player health bars are pretty limited compared to like boss health bars or even like general NPC health bars, right?
mhm,
A DPS getting two cooldowns that they can pair together is obviously very good too, but they're not going to one shot the boss.
right.
They're going to do a bunch of extra damage. Maybe it allows you to do things like you might have an arcane mage that can carry damage on an empty recollection because they get to combine all of their cooldowns to just a huge amount of damage. But that's
Mhm.
one mob as part of a larger fight instead of all of the time. Your raiders have 600,000 health. And combining two cooldowns, if there's only a couple of places that you need to actually use that extra power, I just
You could
dump
delete a
healers.
mechanic.
Yeah,
Yeah. Like I mean, like Rashok was a really good example of this early on with our preservation evokers and like echo and reverberation, I think it was, where like they would like some of like the bombs that went off in P1, the health bar didn't move or like it
yeah,
dropped and then was immediately the fray was full health.
yeah,
Um and so I think that's the other aspect of it that makes it sort of unfun is like there's now like because previously and if we look at like even like legion healing right or like Nyalotha for example like or early Nyalotha I'll say with like limited corruption because corruption makes it a little weird
yeah,
but the idea is like you could have someone sit at 50% health for 3-4 seconds and you would have to heal them up eventually but it wasn't like an immediacy where like
yeah,
nowadays it's someone sits at less than 80% health and there's a mechanic coming, they are dead. Which is like the most to me, it's just extremely unfun because it's people make a joke that healing is sort of like a whack-a-mole activity, which I get. Like you're sort of making sure all the health bars are max, but it becomes a frustrating whack-a-mole activity when you have to hit two players at the same time with the same amount of healing. You just don't
yeah,
have a button to do that.
yeah.
And it's like, well, who do I like less? Because I'll save the other person, right?
And that's actually one thing. So our holy paladin is a huge fan of the gameplay brought about by the rework, and one of the things they
Mhm.
like is it to, from their perspective, it gave them the ability again to do triage healing. Like
Mhm.
it allowed them. Obviously, Paladin was still very good and nerfed like 5 times. Um, it's uh basically the way that Glimmer and Holy Shock was tuned allowed them to like, okay, I can Holy Shock one, I can next, and it's gonna heal both of them, and that allows me to deal with that situation in a way that I
Mhm.
couldn't before, where I just like, I don't know, light a dot spammed and just
Yeah, it hit the you crit the right person or hit the
yeah,
right person. Yeah. No, yeah, I mean, that is to me like when healing to me is the most fun when there is pressure, but you have time to make a decision, right? Like I think that's to me when it's sort of like at its height is there's pressure on you to make decisions, but there's not pressure on you to make decisions in half a second or 1 second. You have
yeah,
like 2 or 3 seconds to assess, okay, like the healing is going out, we're ramping up, we're topping off the raid. It's taking maybe like 4 or 5 seconds for the raid to come back to full health, but it's not that's okay because there's not an ability that's coming half a second later that's going to kill anybody under a certain threshold.
yeah.
Or like you don't have to
Neltharion
panic kill people.
Neltharion is really bad about this. I think Neltharion is probably the poster child for this effect, where if you look at phase two, especially,
Oh, that fucking overlap, dude. I sorry.
yeah, so like the first part of phase two is pretty chill. The first Umbrella Annihilation is not a big deal. You heal the people with hearts. There's not a whole lot else going on. Then the first like fine, the tank breaks the wall and everybody gates, and there's volcanic hearts into Umbrella Annihilation into Rushing Darkness. Everything hits the fan.
It
It's
that
crazy.
point that point is the most frustrating because I like my raid leader will be like, "You got to heal people with the heart debuffs," and I'm like, 100% understand, got to heal people with the heart debuffs, but this person died because they took a hit of the heart debuff, then took an umbral and fell over, and like happened in half a second. So like I don't know what like
Yeah,
they could have hit a defensive, cool, but like still it's not like that.
yeah,
Or we have the shatter debuff, so I am ramping through that. I'm not
yeah,
triaging people, so it's
yeah,
like and I know healing's not a single person that you have, 3 or 4 other people healing with you, but it's still the same idea where like we're taking a shatter debuff and that same overlapping point. And then then the best part about that whole thing is there is another umbral into hearts at the end of the phase as you're running into the next room,
yeah,
which or the next section to kill the third at. And it's just like,
yeah. And that is like it's a huge amount of pressure, and it's also exemplary of like how powerful cooldowns are.
yeah,
Um, because for example, on prog we had salvation on the first move, and just like when that salve goes off, everything's fine.
yeah, gravy.
Everything's. But if you don't have that cooldown, everything is very much not okay. Just
Right. Yeah.
not okay at all. There's It is actually kind of funny. Holy Priest does a ton of just like all the time healing, right? They are
Hmm.
really good at that. Um, but still, like Salve and him are just extremely powerful that they have access to. Um, and Salve in particular could just before they nerfed the Shadow Fiend him interaction, M
Oh
could
yeah.
also just erase mechanics from existence.
Hmm.
Um, and replacing those when we swapped off of having a Holy Priest left. Uh, then we It took a lot. Like I think right now we have a flourish and a aura mastery on that, and people use health potions or health potions on that
Yeah.
corruption gateway.
Yeah. Which I mean, like, I'm. So this is where I struggle because, like, I understand that that's like supposed to be a pressure point in the fight, but that's like not the only one because you have that umbral 20, 30 seconds later as you move into it that has a
Yeah,
similar, not the same like knockback and that, but it still has hearts, still has the
that's
silence
hearts and
lines,
rushing darkness. Yeah,
and corruption targets are getting picked, meaning
yeah,
that like if you don't have the corruption targets topped off, they may die during that. So and there's movement, which is like the other biggest aspect is that almost all of the healers nowadays I guess maybe Druid kind of gets away with this, but almost every other healer to do their highest HPS have to stand and plant for
Yeah.
like a couple seconds.
That's one of the things that has been very, I would say, fun and interesting learning to do healing cooldowns this tier is
Hmm.
figuring out like, okay, this is a big pressure point, but it's a pressure point with movement, so we have to use a flourish for it. And
Yeah.
so that then kind of starts dictating like, okay, if we have to use a flourish for this, that means that we can't use it for this other thing, so maybe we have to use salvation for him or
Hmm.
ascendance or anything like that. Um, Also, just like so, Restless Shaman does very bad HPS overall. They just do.
Hmm.
It's hilarious looking at this. They're so far below in terms of actual HPS, but their cooldowns keep you from dying are
So good, dude.
really good. Like they have two don't die buttons. APT is ridiculously good.
Hmm.
And like half a rally plus a free battle res. Just super good. Um, and then Spirit Link Totem. Again, just like
Yeah.
if it's not literally one shotting the whole raid, then it's very hard to die through a Spirit Link Totem.
Yeah. No, yeah, and I mean even just from like a single button, like Cloudburst is still a very like powerful cooldown,
Yeah.
right? Like if you time it specifically right, like there's still a lot of healing you can get from that. So yeah, I mean I think to me like the worst part about all of this is just that intense pressure of like in a pull, there's no like in Rashlock, for example, there's no breaks for
Yeah.
the 5.5 minutes you're killing that boss,
Which
which is like
that's
unique.
that's
But like I
how
sorry.
I was gonna say that's how Sepulcher was for like the whole raid, right?
Well, no. So at least as a monk, Sepulcher was different. Well, yeah, Sepulcher was slightly different because of Venthyr, right? So like
Okay.
Sepulcher and then like
I mean, I guess you turned your
Sanctum.
raid frames off, so
It was slightly different, but that's still the same idea where like at that point it's the same like you could spread enough healing out across the raid and like you could sort of remove mechanics if you could line it up.
yeah,
So,
it's so in Sepulcher, I would say like Alondris, Lords of Dread, Raglan, and the Jailer. Just all gas, no brakes. Maybe they weren't for
yeah.
Mistweaver. Anduin had brakes. Anduin had like
Yeah.
when you transition into and out of the intermission, you got to chill for a little bit
Yeah.
while the RP went off, and so that gave you some breaks. But then like the Jailer, all gas, no brakes, 13 or not 13, 11 minutes of that.
Yeah.
And Raglan is a tank, all gas, no brakes the whole time.
Mm.
And like Sarkareth is very much actually like that as a tank as well. Uh,
Yeah.
so like that's not a unique thing, but it does sometimes make it really exhausting, right?
No. I think I mean even this tier, like I agree with your position there with like Sanctum, but also like Magmarax isn't like Magmarax is a different set of like all gas from a healer perspective because the first part of it's fairly simple.
And
But
then it
like once
goes
you start
crazy.
moving around the arena, it's like, okay, I need to make sure that like the people who get the dot as they run out are high enough that they're not going to die. The main soak people have to be all high enough in the made soak, right? And
Yeah,
then, I mean, if your healers do this, like I have to remember I need to soak things. So like
yeah,
I'm moving, looking for soaks while watching raid frames, while making sure people are running the opposite direction of healer of a cooldown. It's just
yeah,
it's I'm fine with that because I mean healer's job is to heal, and I 100% get that. But there's a certain level where it starts to teeter into just the absurd of like I'm literally playing DDR on like 15x difficulty and like
yeah,
one mess up in the raid wipes. You're just like, well, this sucks, right? Because like
yeah,
you can have that similar all gas piece from a healing perspective. I think Theon gives the example of Shadhar, which I think is a maybe not the best example of like older healing fights, but still a very similar example of like there was points of a lot of AoE damage, and there was points where you need to make sure people are topped, but it never felt and there was movement, right? You're either like running to like I guess drop off the ED things, right? Or picking, I don't
yeah,
know, I forget how the fight worked.
yeah,
Exactly. Or there were still those points of it, but it wasn't it was like a slow burn, right? Like it was like a you're on fire the entire time, but as long as you move a little bit forward, you're fine. Versus like a nice jog pace where like this seems
yeah.
like nowadays you're like sprinting at all points
I mean,
in a
from
fight.
from what you're saying, it basically sounds like there's two things. One, cooldowns are too strong.
Yeah, 100%.
because
Healing is too strong, which in turn makes it so that damage is too high.
well,
Or
not
damage needs to be more
healing
deadly.
in general per se, but healing cooldowns
No,
are
even healing in general is too high.
really
Yeah, so, like, the 1 minute like, Evoke is a 1-minute cooldown for Monk.
right.
It is literally
Right,
hundreds
but
of
that's a
thousands of HPS each
right, but
time.
that's a cooldown. I know it's a
But
one minute cooldown,
it's a
but
1-minute
but
cooldown.
it's
But
still
even
like the gap between a Mistweaver healing, like we had a Mistweaver frog, right?
yeah.
The gap between what a Mistweaver can do with Invoke Yu'lon and what they do without Invoke Yu'lon is just like not even the same universe. Because they hit Invoke Yu'lon, and you, if they do that right, it's very close to just removing mechanics.
Right, but I think my point is that I guess you're right. Cooldowns are too strong because they're shorter, but I think in general, overall healing is also too strong.
Yeah,
Even in the interim, like even in the middle between points, right? Like the Rashlock example, like you don't technically need a cooldown for every smash, right? For every like
yeah,
healing debuff. Like if as a monk, if as a mistweaver, I get lucky with renewing mist spreads and I have, 8, 9, 10 out on the raid,
yeah,
I remove the absorb from 8 or 9 people,
yeah,
like almost immediately without hitting
yeah.
anybody. And that's just doing my normal rotation. So yeah, I mean, I think it's both. I think you're right. It's a combination of like just in general, healers are too strong, and that would include their cooldowns plus just their basic abilities. Like I don't care about mana as a Mistweaver, where
Although
traditionally I
that's
would have.
partially your tier set right now, right?
But it's your tier set. But if I like, even if my tier set, like there are certain fights, like I think not Rashok, but Sarkareth and Magmarax to a certain extent. Like
Yeah,
I'll take Manatee just because I can,
yeah,
because like that'll help me out, right? Or even previously to the tier set, like you could have Manatee and Spirit of the Crane together,
right.
which is I know it's changing in 10.17, but
Yeah,
yeah, it's that combination of talents is just in general just all too strong. I think in general, like healers getting the most out of talent trees. Like it just
yeah.
is a blanket like generalization. Like I think in terms of power, if you compare it to what tanks gained and what DPS gained, and
Tanks are
healers
not the
relative to what
ones
they
gaining
had.
the most from the talent trees.
Yeah.
Let me move on.
That's fair. So I mean, I think that's my sort of thesis here is that like they need to generally reduce the overall power of healers and potentially through talent trees, and in turn then ramp down the damage. Because this whole
I
like
think that's the second piece of it, right? That you keep
yeah,
going to is the pacing is really high.
yeah,
It's go 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 go, no breaks, and um, that can be fun. But also when you're doing it for like, Sarkara thankfully is a 7.5 minute, and it's
yeah,
got some built-in breaks where you just don't have anything going on because people are downstairs, so you get to chill and not be like freaking out about people's health bars for a while.
yeah,
Uh, but it's still like you look at Echo Notherian, and you basically, technically, you have two breaks. You have
yeah.
the transition from phase 1 to phase 2, and the transition, or like the beginning of phase 3 before the Seven Destruction. But like the end of, like the beginning of phase 3, you're honestly, at least for us, you're still recovering from the end of phase 2.
Exactly. There's I would say like yeah, the only real break in Echo is P1 to P2 because
Yeah.
P2 to P3 you've just taken maybe an Ebon Destruction or not but
An
whatever
Umbrella
the
Annihilation, yeah.
yeah, Umbral Annihilation and like people still have heart debuffs and like you're yeah, I think that's my point is that the sprint is too high and the moment to moment decision making is too close together. Like making like the right decision in a too short amount of time, and if you mess that up, people die. And that all just comes back to like I think Blizzard has to do that in the current idea, or you're just going to two heal, potentially one heal every fight, right? Because
Yeah.
it's
Because healers are too powerful, basically.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I can definitely, so I see that from like the Brewmaster angle, right? Right now,
hmm
Brewmaster is very fast paced. We've always had the 1 second GCD, always had a pretty quick rotation. Right now, just the number of on GCD abilities we have combined with the the breakneck pace of Blackout combo means that you are really, really pushing buttons all the time, and
yeah,
taking like having a gap messes things up very quickly. But also,
yeah,
Celestial Brew is on the GCD, and so you do run into these situations, and then combined with the scale of damage, if
yeah.
you uh, delay your Celestial Brew by one GCD, it can be life and death. You can go from full to dead. like that literally happens on Sarkareth. If you delay your Celestial Brew by 1 GCD, then you get Void Claws and Malite in the same global, and you just die.
Yeah.
Or the other way around, if you push it early, then your Celestial Brew gets consumed by the damage before the Void Claws, and you then don't have Celestial Brew for the Void Claws.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's an interesting like balancing problem. And I know we talked mostly about this in Raid, but I think like Mythic Plus ends up being very similar
Mythic
in
Plus
terms
healing,
of just like
I've heard a lot about just like the level of pressure.
yeah. Which and to be fair to Blizzard, you have to do that because if not, then like you could essentially as a healer like AFK through most of it, or like you end up with like not I wouldn't say you have to go as far as like no healer runs, right? But I think it's more of the idea where like in BFA timing, like you only cared about healer damage. Like
Yeah,
your healers didn't do damage, then there was a minimal amount of healing that you couldn't handle with just DPS teams. So you needed one in there, but yeah, between those moments when you needed the healing, you had to do damage. So yeah, I don't know what the fix is. I mean, I think ultimately to me it's just very stressful right now as a healer, at least
yeah,
in raids personally, just because of the fact that like if I heal the wrong person at the wrong time, like not even if I heal the wrong person, it's like if my hots don't spread to the right person
yeah,
during a ramp, someone dies, and it's just and there's not a good explanation as to why that person died. I think there's always a way you could say like, oh, they could have health stone, they could have used a defensive, somebody could have done the triage, right? But there's that like in the moment, I have two people to heal, I heal one,
yeah,
and the other person dies. It's just like, and that just happens too often. I think that's the other thing. So there's too many instances of that in the current
yeah.
tier.
I think some of that is like if everything else stayed the same, but it were easier to reliably like get coverage on your healing cooldown, so you're not fighting to get enough renewing mists out to cover the raid for you. You're not fighting
Hmm.
to get lifeline on everything. You're not fighting to get, all of your glimmers. Then potentially it's just a little bit feels better because you're not going to be in a situation where like, oh no, I only got 17 of 20 people covered. Those 3 people are gonna die unless they push something, right?
Yeah.
And then that maybe eliminates some of those situations. And then the kind of counter to that is that if damage is a little bit slower, where you
Hmm.
can put a GCD into one person and GCD into the second person, maybe that's all.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's why. I mean, I think ultimately, like the end of BFA or even BFA in general, healing wise, while not Misuver wasn't the best, and I don't think like Azurite armor, whatever. I think that the healing, the damage output model was probably some of the best it's been in a while, right? Like I think Legion, I sort of throw away because Misuver was terrible there, but I think Legion also had very similar in terms of the damage patterns. I think now it's just again, it's that arms race of like you give a player too much power, you need to have a corresponding force to make it so that power just doesn't overwhelm the
Yeah.
game, and like that's where we're at. So we'll see what happens. I think it's some really good feedback, and I think in general it'll if they do make a change, it'll make healing a little bit more, I guess, palatable or easy to use. But like for me, I probably am not healing next year because of this, because it's just like
Well, we should get, as part of the 10.2 PTR, when that comes out, hopefully a couple weeks, we should
mhm,
start seeing stuff from the new raid. We probably won't get raid testing for a while yet. Probably be like
yeah,
a month before we get any raid testing, if not longer, given, where the PR is right
yeah,
now.
exactly.
But that will be pretty informative, I think. This tier definitely felt a lot different from Vault of the Incarnates as far as healing.
Uh-huh.
Um, and we'll see. Like they made big changes for this tier. They may well make big changes for. They didn't directly nerf healers. They very strategically avoided nerfing healers this tier. They
Yeah.
they strategically avoided saying that they were nerfing healers and just effectively nerfed healers by buffing everybody's HP and then the damage and then not buffing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we'll see
Um,
if they go any further next year, but
yeah,
that'll be a bridge we cross once we start to see 10-2 and the changes there.
yeah,
So
yeah, for sure, for sure.
think that's it
Meanwhile,
though for me. Crying
maybe
about being a healer.
maybe they can take Celestial Brew off the GC.
Yeah, we all
Fingers
have goals.
crossed.
We all have wants and dreams and hopes, right?
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be it for the show today. Thank you all for watching and or listening. And if you enjoyed this podcast and you want to support it and the work we do over at the Peak of Serenity, you can do that over at our Patreon at patreon.com/Peak of Serenity. And of course, come and join the Discord. It is the best place for you to come and talk about what you would like to see as far as damage profile and healing profiles in the future. Come and hang out in Mist Lounge and just chat, talk about it, or you know come and join the unofficial F1 Lounge in the section.
Oh, we're expanding that to the Mistweaver Lounge too.
Yeah,
We got a couple people talking F1 there, so
yeah.
might have to make a new channel just for F1 talk. We'll see. Talk to Babs.
But yeah, that is gonna be it for the show today. Thank you all for listening, and we will see you next week.
Bye.